Hi, I'm Gary, and welcome to the galley. In the galley today, we're going to be baking some brie. We're going to do brie in puff pastry, brie out of puff pastry. One a little sweet, one a little savory. We're also going to bake some brie in individual little bites. It's the holiday season, and baked brie is the perfect addition to your appetizer table. So, if you're ready, let's get started and wrap some brie. So for my brie out of puff pastry, I want to take a little bit savory. And I'm going to do that with pancetta and caramelized onions. So the first step that I want to do is to cook my pancetta. And in the drippings from my pancetta, I'm going to caramelize my onions in them. Now, I had the deli counter slice my pancetta fairly thick. I want to be able to chop it and have a nice dice. If you don't have pancetta, you can substitute bacon. Now the difference in pancetta and bacon is they're both from the pork belly, but the pancetta is dry cured, more like ham. You could actually go ahead and eat this. It doesn't have to be cooked. Where the bacon is smoked. But if you can't find pancetta or you just want to use bacon, maybe you have bacon, you can absolutely substitute bacon for the pancetta. And I did about 1/4 of a pound of pancetta. So I'm going to let that start to cook and brown. So while our pancetta finishes cooking, I'm going to talk to you about our onion. Now, I did 2 large sweet onions. You can do regular onions, but what I want to talk to you about is cut them pole to pole. And if you can see here, there's like the grain of the onion running this way. So when you cut your onions, make sure you cut with the grain and not against it. Especially for caramelized onions, cutting against the grain will make your onions kind of disintegrate and fall apart. Now, I know this looks like a lot for our one little brie, but they are going to really shrink down. And if I'm going to caramelized onions, I love to have leftovers. I can put them in the refrigerator, I can put them in the freezer, I can add them to soups, grilled cheeses, omelets, pasta salads, endless possibilities for my caramelized onions. So I want to remove my pancetta, leaving all those beautiful drippings behind. And to this, I want to add just about a teaspoon of olive oil. And when you caramelize onions, the bigger the pan, the better. The more surface area these onions have to touch the pan, the better. So we want to spread those out, break them up. So to my onions, I'm going to add 2 good pinches of kosher salt, and that kosher salt is going to help them release their moisture, and that moisture is going to help cause steam, and that steam is going to help them stick to the bottom of this pan and create that bond that's going to adhere itself and just help these onions caramelize. And I'm going to do about 1/4 of a cup of water. Again, looking for some steam here. Now when I'm caramelizing onions, I want to do this at a medium-low temperature. This is not something that we want to rush. We want this to go slow. It could take up to 30 minutes, depending on how many onions you have in your pan. But don't rush this. We're just going to let that slowly do its thing, and then we'll come back and just keep checking on it periodically. So you can see we are cooking down here. developing some color on our onions. I'm going to do just maybe a teaspoon of red wine vinegar. And this acidity is going to help balance that sweetness from the onions. And it's also going to help pick up all those delicious brown bits from the bottom of the skillet that we want. So our onions are continuing to cook. Let's get on with our brie and pastry, and we can get that one in the oven. So I have 1 sheet of puff pastry. I just want a little bit of flour on my board so it doesn't stick. And I'm a big goofball who forgot to put her puff pastry out of the freezer this morning. So I've been waiting a few minutes trying to let it come up to temperature. And it's still a little cold, but we can work with it. I'd rather work with my pastry cold than letting it sit out at room temperature and getting really soft. So I don't tend to need to make this really big. I just kind of, where the seams are, want to make sure that the pastry is one whole complete piece. Now, if I had one of those big wheels of brie, yes, then I would want to continue to roll this out. I just want to be able to cover it. When doing brie and pastry, there's so many options. You can do something like a pepper jelly. You can do a fig spread. You can do any kind of jam or jelly that you have in the fridge. I happen to have this spicy plum chutney. So I want to do my chutney or jelly or whatever you pick the size of my brie. So I'm just going to go around my brie here so that I have that outline and know. And I'm just going to spread that in between there. So I thought, because I had blackberries, I was trying to do this with just what I have in the fridge, because that's what these baked bries are all about. You can just improvise and make it yours and what you have to go on. You don't have to do fresh here. You could do dried fruits as well. Chop them up. You could do craisins. You could even do fresh plums to go with that plum chutney. So there's really no wrong turn. And just because those are kind of big, I'm going to cut them in half. But I had blackberries from a blackberry cobbler the other night, so I'm going to use those up. Pecans, because, well, I had these pecans and they're already chopped. So on top they go. On top of that goes our brie. Now you want to do your brie so that you don't have spillage. But I will tell you, that's a hard thing to do no matter how well you wrap it. I find that pretty much always get some spillage. And that's okay. A lot of times when that brie starts leaking out, it kind of lets you know that it's done. So I'll just have a little bit of egg here. And I'm going to brush. And this egg is like my glue. And then I'm going to take this next piece up and over. And I just want to cover that brie again. We're trying to encase this brie in there so it doesn't leak. My plum chutney is leaking out a little bit. And then our last piece. And then we're going to turn that over. Kind of tighten it all up. Onions are getting really close. They smell so good. So I've got my pastry all wrapped up, and I just stole a piece, extra piece of pastry from my other sheet. I normally am thinking more ahead and steal it from this sheet, but I didn't. But you can decorate, you can leave it just like it is, or you can decorate it. You can maybe make this time of year a holly wreath or grapevines and grapes, because that's probably the easiest thing to do. But I just twisted this little skinny piece, and I've decided just to make an S for still away. So I'm just going to put just a little egg on there to help that stick and make my S. You could do the initial of your family's last name, so lots of options. I just went with the simple S. We're going to give this whole thing an egg wash. And now I have a choice to make. I can go straight into my oven, and when it comes out, I'm going to have to wait at least 20 minutes for that cheese to not be molten lava, because if I cut it as soon as it comes out of the oven, the cheese is just going to roll out onto the floor. So you really have to wait that 20 minutes when this comes out of the oven. Or I can put this in the freezer for an hour. And if I put this in the freezer for an hour and then bake it, then I only have to wait 5 minutes before I can start cutting into it, because that cheese started to freeze in there, so it doesn't get as liquid as when it's soft like this. So depending on what kind of time you have, I normally just don't do the freezer thing. I just do it up and then put it in the oven a good 45 minutes before I need it. That way it's got its 20 minutes to cook and 20 minutes to sit and settle. So you decide what kind of time you have, and do you want to cut into it immediately when that pastry's at its perfect hot crispiness, or do you have the patience to wait that 20 minutes for it to settle? For today, we're going straight into the oven. 20 minutes. I'm going to set my timer for 15 and start checking on it. But usually about 20 minutes. All right, so my onions, and this isn't all of them. This is just what I pulled out to cool down to use for our brie. And I'm going to let them cool down, because I'm going to. So here we go to our unstuffed. And what I mean by unstuffed is I'm just going to put this in a cast iron, and I'm going to put all my goodies on top, and then we're just going to bake it like that. I have this smaller size cast iron. If I had to, I could put it in my bigger one. If I didn't have the smaller one, I could do any kind of dish that can go in the oven. You can put this in. So we're going to chop up these onions. I'm going to add this pancetta to it. Chop that all up together. So I just wanted to show you that you don't always have to go sweet with these bries. And yes, even if it's savory, you can still wrap it up in the pastry. But you don't always have to go sweet. It's okay to take it a little savory. It's just as delicious, sweet or savory. So I think that's looking good and chopped. Push that to. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to spread on some mustard. I have whole grain. You could do Dijon too. You could, you know, if you wanted to add a little sweetness, do a honey mustard. But I'm going to go with the whole grain mustard. Spread that all around the top. And then I am going to add just a hair of sweetness and just sprinkle a little bit of brown sugar on top of that. And then on top of that, I'm going to do those beautiful onions and pancetta. Oh, this is going to be so good. This one I think I'm looking forward to more than the sweet one. So again, we're going to go into 350-degree oven for 15 to 20 minutes. If it starts looking like it's really leaky and super soft, then go ahead and pull it out. But set your timer for 15 minutes and then just peek at it. I want to talk to you about doing Brie little mini bites. And these are great for an appetizer, and people just kind of get to pick it up and just bite right in. And I want to just give this a quick roll. All right, so for these little mini ones, I kind of want to roll my pastry out fairly thin. I can get as many individual ones as I can out of this piece of pastry, excuse me, without making it paper thin. I don't want super paper thin, but I want to stretch it and get as many individual little pastries as I can. Now I'm going to use a round cutter for this, but if you don't have a round cutter, then you can just square this off and cut your pastry in squares. And I just have a mini muffin tin. I'm going to give that a spray. But what you really want to make sure is that your, and obviously you didn't cut that well, your pastry is bigger than your little muffin tin. Otherwise it'll sink right down. And you just want to put your pastry right in there, and as you can see, the square works just fine. So if you don't have the round cutter, feel free. And the nice thing about the cutting them into squares is you don't have any pastry waste. So I'm going to finish these up, and then we'll be back to stuff them. So I'm going to do a little switcheroo. I'm going to come out with our pastry. I'm going to go in with our unpastry. Put that to the side so I can share the oven. And then you have choices of how you want to serve your brie. You can do a piece of slate. You can do a cutting board. I'm going to choose cutting board today. And again, this needs 20 minutes to set. I'm going to put that off to the side on my cutting board here, so then I can put crackers and my toast around it. Doesn't that sound good? All right, so we're going to set that aside. We're just bouncing all over the brie world today. We've got our pastry cooling down. We've got our unpastry in the oven. Now we have these beautiful little individual ones to do. And again, just like anything else in the brie world, take it sweet, take it savory. So we'll do a couple of both. So I'm just going to cut my brie. So I'm just going to cut my brie into little bite-sized pieces and pop them right inside there. Now, I do know that some of the grocery stores now are doing little baby bries, kind of like the Baby Bells, and you could absolutely use that to pop in here, but I think it would be very expensive to do that. So I'm just going to cut mine in little squares, and because we're going to do some sweet and then we're going to do savory. So what I'm going to do for the savory, I have a toothpick here, is just do a little bit of my mustard on there. Thought I had a brush. I might just use my finger. So put a little bit of your mustard on there. Spread that around. Dip it in your brown sugar. Let that stick. And then we're just going to take this and pop it right into our little brie. And then, you guessed it, we're going to top that with our chopped up onions and pancetta. And then these will take a different form. We did the peach chutney, and I think this time we'll go fig, and we'll do a little dollop. A dollop will do ya. A little dollop of fig, and a half of a blackberry. Again, any fruit you want, any fruit that you have, any dry fruit. And you can choose here to do nuts or no nuts. You might have people allergic to nuts, so feel free to go no nuts. Not quite. I have to have my timer, or else, especially me, I will just start talking and forget about what I'm doing. So I'm going to finish stuffing these and pop them in the oven, and then when I come back, then the fun's going to happen, and we're going to get to taste all of this stuff. So I'll see you in just a minute. Hope you enjoyed making brie with me this morning. I got up early this morning, so tasting this is going to be my breakfast, but it's been an exciting morning. I set the fire detector off, cooking pancetta. I filmed a segment without turning the camera on, but I made it through it, and we have 3 different exciting bries. Now we have our brie that we did in puff pastry, and again, just stuff that with whatever you have in the pantry or whatever excites you. Dry fruit, fresh fruit, jams, jellies, spreads. The sky's the limit. We did our brie out of pastry, just in a cast iron skillet, and you can feel it's starting to tighten up a bit. It was really, really soft. And we did this one savory. We went pancetta, caramelized onions, a little spicy brown mustard, and we just added a little bit of sweet with that brown sugar. So that one I'm really excited to taste. And we did our little bites. Now, these are great to just set out as a platter and let people just pick them up. They don't have to work for it. But I think first we'll jump over here to our brie and pastry. Now, I always like to give people a knife with a little serrated edge just to kind of make that easy for them when they're not sawing. And here we go. Get our little first piece out of there. And you see that cheese is just at the perfect softness. It's been sitting about 20 minutes, so it's just... So let me show you just how that is oozing out of there. So you can imagine if we had cut into that when it first came out of the oven, just how soft that cheese would be and how it would really pour out. So this was plum chutney, call it plutney, and raspberries and a little bit of pecans. Delicious. I love baked brie, even for breakfast. So good. I'm going to dig into that one. We'll see how soft that cheese is. You can see it melty. And then you can just see inside there how that cheese is just melting right out. So it might not be the prettiest top that we've ever seen on a brie, but I have a feeling it's going to be super tasty. Yes, definitely my favorite. A little bit of saltiness from that pancetta and sweetness from those onions, and then just a kick of spice from that Dijon. That is beautiful. So I'm going to have to finish this up so I can jump back in there. And again, you can see how that brie is just starting to ooze around there. So everybody's just gonna love coming up and dipping into this. And then our little cute little bites. Aren't they cute? I just love doing things like this. It is more time consuming to do these individual ones than to do one big one. But in the end, I think it's worth it. I've got them. Oh, I haven't done fig yet. Let's try fig. So I've got fig and blackberry and brie. I just love puff pastry. Just light and airy and crispy. So these another great idea. So I'm going to get started over here on this brie with pancetta and onions and finish up my breakfast. Thank you so much for being with us today. And if you haven't already, if you're new to us, please hit that subscribe button. And even if you're not new to us, give me a thumbs up. All of this helps me tremendously by leaving a comment, give me a thumbs up, and subscribing. Happy holidays to everyone. I hope everybody is safe and happy this season. And until next time, safe cruising.